Hello, thanks for watching my video today. I'm going to be talking about the power of action, specifically collective action, in the face of the climate emergency. My name is Bernadette Rodgers. I'm an astronomer and a climate activist. My activism takes many forms, and I love to give public talks to all kinds of groups. So if you know anyone that might be interested, please get in touch with me at this email address. Thanks. This talk is not about the science or the impacts of climate change. We know the climate crisis is here now. We see it every day in the news. I'm afraid we've become normalized to these headlines and immune to the dire warnings, but we see them. And there's good news too. There's lots of positive things happening. However, still not nearly at the scope and speed that's needed to avoid catastrophe. The problem, of course, is our fossil fuel addiction. And this graph from the 2022 Emissions Gap Report from the United Nations International Panel on Climate Change shows the difference in emissions between government commitments so far out to 2030 and the emission level required by 2030 for a decent chance at limiting global warming anywhere near 1.5 degrees Celsius. The difference between these is called the carbon emission gap, and as you can see, it's large. So that is the basis for these goals. We must cut carbon emissions in half by 2030 and reach so-called net zero, meaning no net additional human-caused emissions by 2050 to avert the worst climate impacts. So we know what we need to do. This is a well-defined problem, and it has known solutions. It's a challenging problem, no doubt, but perhaps surprisingly a doable one. The issue is not the science or the solutions, but the political will. And that's where activism comes in. I define activism as using our personal agency to affect change outside of our direct control. Our own lifestyle choices absolutely are also important, but activism is about moving the needle for systemic change. And activism is a spectrum. Activists call this the ladder of engagement, from low energy to high. For example, voting is a basic civic duty and a very important way to support climate action in politics. But we can also visit and contact our representatives. We can give testimony. We can sit in at the Capitol and disrupt halls of power. And politics is only one path. We need to talk about this problem. We can give public talks. We can write op-eds. We can speak at a rally. You can join organizations, give them your time and money, organize marches, and before you know it, you might be blocking oil trains or getting arrested. These are personal choices, of course, and not everyone is willing or able to do all of them. That's okay. There are lots of options and lots of us. And the higher the energy, the greater the impact. So where are you on the spectrum? Can you move up the ladder by a rung or two? Because we need more people operating near the top. And that's because political scientists tell us that it only takes about 3.5% of the population actively involved to win a movement. In the US, that's about 10 million people. We are not there yet. Although surveys show that more than half of us are alarmed or concerned. So I would argue we don't have to waste time and energy on the doubters and deniers. 1/4 of us are sufficiently alarmed, at least. That should be enough, right? But when we take a closer look at this bubble, it turns out only 1/3 of those people are what the survey calls exhibiting high levels of climate activism. And that would be enough, except that the fine print says that only 17% of those are actively participating now. The rest of the active alarmed say they definitely would, but I'm not sure what they're waiting for. So I suspect the other 83% are alarmed, but they are likely acting on the bottom rungs of the ladder of engagement. Moving all of these folks up into being actively involved is part of what activism is all about. And you don't have to take my word for it. Dr. James Hansen, the NASA climate scientists that told Congress way back in 1988 that global warming was happening and that the safe level in our atmosphere was 350 parts per million. We're now pushing 420. He retired from NASA famously to become a more outspoken activist. And he says, we need activists. You don't need to lie down before a train or get arrested to make a difference. We can make our democracies work, but it's hard work and it will require a lot of people. And Dr. Christiana Figueres, the architect of the 2015 UN Paris Agreement, says that we have a responsibility now to find the inner strength to pull through this. Most of us have not been answering the call from science in this way. We have to go far beyond what we think we can achieve at speed. One group that has been answering this call is Scientist Rebellion. This is a direct action group that formed a few years ago along with Extinction Rebellion, and their website says, what is the point in documenting ever greater detail at catastrophe if we're not willing to do anything about it? They argue, and I agree, that academics are perfectly placed to wage a rebellion. We exist in hubs of knowledge and expertise. We're well connected across the world. We have large platforms to inform and educate, and we have implicit authority and legitimacy. We can make a difference, and we must do what we can to halt the greatest destruction in human history. And I'm going to come back to Scientist Rebellion in a few minutes. So why astronomers specifically? Well, astronomers are great activists. Again, we have intellectual authority. Folks expect us to comprehend a complex planetary-sized problem like climate. So if we don't seem too concerned, why should they be? Let's show our concern. Let's show urgency. Let's talk about how important the science is. And let's use language like climate emergency. And astronomy is a great gateway science. We've all been approached by strangers to ask us questions about astronomy. We know people love public astronomy talks. So let's take advantage of the privilege we have working in this field by talking about this critical issue. And we have the expertise. We don't need to be climate scientists. We know planets. We certainly know radiation, the greenhouse effect, feedback loops. All of these things are understood by us. And we certainly know that the idea that we can terraform Mars or move to some other planet is completely ridiculous. So we are perfectly placed to address this issue. And finally, let me just say, the climate crisis is a moral issue as well. We know that around the world and across the United States, Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income communities that have contributed the least to this problem and have the fewest resources to defend themselves are suffering first and worst. Climate justice means recognizing this disproportionate impact and addressing the root causes, including racism and colonialism, and recognizing that these marginalized communities are not victims. They are experts. They have wisdom and sovereignty that must be respected. And they have answers. They are survivors, and they are needed at the table where the future is being decided. So there are plenty of reasons to act, but here's a little secret. There's a selfish reason too. It feels good to take action. Once I face the reality of the climate crisis and our responsibility, it's not something you can unlearn. And cognitive dissonance is a powerful thing. So going about our daily lives as if there's not an emergency going on can really feel strange. And I personally don't think it's healthy. So that ultimately led me to change my life pretty dramatically. You see, I used to be the head of science operations at Gemini South, and I was in that alarmed bubble, but I was going about my life operating at the bottom of that activism spectrum. And then in 2009, I heard in a colloquium that a principal investigator for an instrument on SOFIA was stepping back from the project out of concern for carbon emissions. That was a wake-up call for me. And it just shows how you never know what the impact of your actions might be. Because I ended up organizing with some colleagues the first AAS sustainability meeting the following year. This turned out to be a huge success and led to the formation of the AAS Sustainability Committee. Later that same year, I did my first public action. And then when my family decided to leave Chile in 2014, a few years later, I made the decision to leave my career and work on this issue. I am now a full-time climate activist and a part-time astronomy professor. I've done more actions than I can count in the last 8 years, including sitting on railroad tracks and getting arrested. That's my path. It's not for everyone. We each have to find our own. And I'll admit that I miss my astronomy career at times, but I don't miss the cognitive dissonance. It might be nice if this work wasn't necessary, but since it is, it feels good to be doing something. And that's a selfish reason for being an activist. And this year, what I'm doing most is with Scientist Rebellion. I've been active with them throughout the year, and we've started making the headlines. Perhaps you've heard of us. There's been at least two large actions this year. And here's me speaking back in April in Portland, Oregon.
The important thing to know is that every 10th of a degree of warming makes a difference. Every year, we continue to pump unnecessary carbon emissions into our atmosphere makes a difference. The problem feels overwhelming, but we do not have the luxury of despair or denial or greenwashing or obstruction. Like it or not, we are alive at a critical time in human history, in the Earth's history, and we get to be the heroes or the villains. We decide.
This person over here is Peter Kalmus. He's very active with Scientist Rebellion, and he is a climate scientist that used to be an astronomer. He says in this quote, "We need everyone to start prioritizing life on this planet." So I believe firmly from my own experience that action and organizing are antidotes to despair, and I encourage you to try it. If you've gotten this far, hopefully now you're wondering, what can I do? Or maybe you're on that activism spectrum and thinking about how you could move up a notch or two, which I think about all the time. And the answer is, of course, there are countless ways, but here's a few suggestions to get you started. First of all, educate yourself continuously. There are, of course, endless resources and materials out there, and it can be overwhelming, but I encourage you to reach past the science literature, reach outside your comfort zone, and seek voices and perspectives that are different from your own. I also encourage you to seek out Indigenous voices. Indigenous environmental activists are amazing, both in the United States and around the world, and Native cultures have a real ethos of interconnectedness with the natural world that's, I think, a critical piece of the answer to this problem. Women are also very active in this movement, and this is a wonderful resource I highly recommend. It's a book of essays by women climate activists, a lot of women of color and Indigenous activists, and a lot of great essays. And then find your people. These are not complicated instructions, but it's important to find folks that you connect with. And this is just a very incomplete list of organizations that I know about personally, but there are, again, countless organizations, identity-based organizations like women's groups, BIPOC-led, Indigenous-led, faith-based groups, science groups like our own Astronomers for Planet Earth, as well as Union of Concerned Scientists and others. Direct action groups, 350.org is one that I know well. Scientist Rebellion, I've mentioned. The Climate Reality Project is an education and outreach group started by Al Gore. Sunrise is a youth movement. There are climate justice groups, social justice groups, legal groups. Our Children's Trust is a group of young people suing our government for a livable future and livable atmosphere. So these are all great organizations, but there are, of course, many, many more. And at the same time, finding your people, also pursue your interests. Find your passion. As you rise up that spectrum of engagement, you may find yourself spending a lot of time doing this. And so it's good to do things that you like and that you enjoy. It doesn't have to be grudgery. There are so many ways to attack this problem. It affects every aspect of our lives, and all of them are needed and helpful. So Project Drawdown is a great program that's calculating quantitative solutions. You can attack the divestment program is attacking our financial industry to stop financing fossil fuels. You could work in regenerative agriculture, oceans, forests, land, food, climate justice, native rights. There's just endless ways to engage, and they're all important and useful. But the most important thing is to go for it. Just start. The rest will take care of itself. It's my experience that activism begets more activism. So if you don't like the first thing you choose to do, try something else. Try a few things. There's plenty to do, and there's room for everyone. And I promise you will not run out of options. Because honestly, it really is not hyperbole to say that we are living at a critical time in human history. And when future generations ask, what did we do? We cannot say we did what we could or we tried. It has to be more than that. There's really only one answer. We did everything that was necessary. And this quote is from a book called The Future We Choose, also by Christiana Figueres. And in fact, as I'm recording this, the COP27 climate conference is wrapping up in Egypt. And these are just a few quotes from an article in The Guardian from UK scientists. I won't read all the words, but just to say that there's a common message here that we cannot count on our governments to act in time. The future is up to all of us. So thanks again for watching, and I hope to hear from you. Bye-bye.